The election in 1956 is the rematch. Eisenhower versus Adlai Stevenson once more. And again, Eisenhower wins. In fact, Eisenhower wins like 41 states to Stevenson's 9, right? Overwhelming victory. But when it comes to when it comes to Eisenhower's second term, Eisenhower is not immune to a phenomenon known as the second term curse. Generally speaking, a president's second term is not as good as its first term, right? And we see that with most presidents in the United States. It even starts with the first president, with George Washington. His second term, not as good as his first. But nevertheless, let's look at what's going on in Eisenhower's second term that we can describe as a kind of a standstill and some setbacks. Well, first of all, there is developments in the civil rights movement, right? There's one more big step under Eisenhower, and that's going to be the Civil Rights Act of 1957. When was the last time we passed a Civil Rights Act in this country? Try 1875. So, passing one is certainly a step in the right direction. Unfortunately, the act doesn't do much. It starts out as a Civil Rights Commission. It talked about protecting the rights of the vote of black citizens, but it doesn't do anything. But just by passing the bill showed that there was a second Reconstruction movement along the way. Now, there's also going to be a setback when it comes to American scientific ingenuity. You see, during the 1950s, the Soviet Union makes great strides in the space race. Space is finally opened up in terms of human exploration, and the Soviet Union is the ones that are the ones that really take it off, right? And they are going to make leaps and bounds ahead of the United States for a while, right? For example, they are going to launch the first satellite. It's known as Sputnik. It's it's the size of anywhere between. I've heard grapefruit. I've heard basketball. Whatever you want, right? So it's it's small. It's not like a satellite of today. But the one thing that it does do is that as it orbits around the world, it sends out a signal. You could actually tune it with your radio. Today we think of radio as like, oh, the thing in your car. Oh, no, when you say radio back in the 1950s, we're talking about radio frequencies with a whole bunch of numbers on the other side of the decimal too. Okay, not just one, right? We are used to. So they could tune into this frequency, and what would they hear? They'd hear ping, ping, ping as it's going around. So that's really going to scare the bejesus out of Americans, because after all, if the Soviet Union can launch satellites up there and they can be orbiting around the world, in fact, go over the American territory, unharmed, what else can they put up there, right? Maybe some sort of weaponry, right? Maybe some, in weaponized space, right? So the United States is going to get heavily involved in trying to basically catch up in order to beat the Russians when it comes to some of the big prizes. Unfortunately, some of the big prizes go to the Russians. The first man in orbit, the first woman in orbit, first spacewalks. Those are all Soviet stuff. We get the big prize, of course. We get the moon, right? And after that, pretty much we were ahead of the game. But nevertheless, the Sputnik and the Soviet advances in science and technology is going to spur on the National Defense Education Act of 1958. The federal government is going to provide money for education in math and science through this act. Why? Because the Soviet Union is seemingly so far ahead in the space race, in science and technology. And so it really is going to build up a lot of fear in Americans, and we're going to basically counteract that with getting a shot in the arm to science and mathematics education in this country.